So it appears that the Final Fantasy XVI conversation surrounding performance mode and quality mode has taken a different turn. Many of you who were, in a sense, talking or in the ecosystem of Final Fantasy fans talking about the demo know that the game had a performance and quality mode, and test metrics were actually done to kind of see what the differences were. And one of the data points or providers was a YouTube channel called El Analista de Bits, and they actually have taken some time to make some, comparative analyses so that you can see. If you watch the video, you'll notice that in some places the game actually works good in its performance mode at 60 FPS, but in some places you're going to have frame drops. Also, when you take a very close look at the way they've actually achieved a 60 FPS, you'll realize that it's either in areas that are not so tasking, or they've made changes to materials and to textures to be able to achieve this performance. Now, after all this is said and done, a lot of folk have said, well, by the time the game's main version comes out, this is what people were hypothesizing, possibly we're going to see the game lock to 60 FPS with better performance, but it appears that Yoshi P, I think this is probably the director of the game or the producer, I don't know, I don't really follow Final Fantasy much, says they will be releasing updates to improve the frame rate of Final Fantasy 16. He says currently there are areas where the frame rate drops when there's a lot of characters, such as towns. They will be working on updates to improve frame rates, so please don't worry about that. So he's getting ahead of things, talking to fans and saying this, so people can actually have their, expectations more realistic. Now, here's the challenge here in regard to all of this. This is something that was actually, reposted by John Linman of Digital Foundry, and he says, my best guess here is that performance mode wasn't part of the original plan and is something they decided to add in late. Based on the demo, I'd stick with the quality mode personally. Now, ladies and gentlemen, many of you know that this is something that we've been talking about here, and I'm sure this is probably going to be used as some console war ammunition. I don't care about the console war. Whoever is giving the best value and the games that you want to play in the best, performance or in the best circumstances is what I encourage you to go for. In this situation, again, I think it continues to emphasize the point that we've been making, that when you're developing or designing your game from ground up, you have to consider that your game has to run at a specific performance. So John is guessing that, this whole performance thing was not necessarily part of the game from beginning of its development. And I think there is a likelihood to that. A lot of these games have a 5-year development window. The new, devices, the Series X, S, the PS5, whatever devices that are consoles right now, or the new generation consoles, right now have not necessarily had that much time in the hands of developers. And when I say had much time, I'm talking, if you think about the last few games that have come out, a lot of developers have had to bend over backwards to be able to get these games performing well on those consoles. Even those who've been successful either have smaller games, or maybe they have another studio developing their PC ports. And I'm giving examples like, think about Sony and their, studios Insomniac and Sony Santa Monica. Think about, Avalanche that made Hogwarts Legacy. They had to pretty much delay their release of Hogwarts Legacy on the PS4 and the Switch so that they could get the consoles and the PC out first. Then they got the PlayStation 4 out, which has been a tasking game for the PS4 anyways. It's insane that they were even still able to go ahead and do it. But I don't see it as impossible. But you think about it from ground up, from day one, you can kind of already tell that these consoles are going to basically be challenged in just brute forcing these games from 30 FPS to 60 FPS. That's not really how the science is going to be working in this scenario. So I guess a little bit more understanding of all of these nuances is going to be demanded, or at least required, from gamers so that they can not necessarily face heavy levels of disappointment. Now, if you're coming to this from an objective perspective and you don't have any axe to grind, you're not here trying to fight some arbitrary, stupid console war, I think the best thing is to basically see, that there are people who are talking about it as, there were, rumors or whispers that there was not going to be a day one patch. Now, this whole talk about patch and so on and so forth, I don't think people realize that this performance thing is not necessarily a bug in its sense. I think people look at a performance mode as some kind of a fix to a game that is broken, that is not running at 60 FPS. No, the game was just not designed from ground up, seemingly, or majority of the game doesn't seem to have been designed from ground up to be able to run at that particular performance. So what's going to have to happen is the devs are going to now go back after the game's release, I guess, or at least they probably are working on some areas of the game, improving it by probably reducing textures, maybe reducing crowd density, reducing the the different details that they have to actually go for, and then eventually start seeing if those are going to be solutions that are going to be able to give them better performance. And then maybe, depending on how the game is received, they might eventually start looking at different structures on how they've coded heavy, mechanics within the game. That's another thing. Mechanics also eat performance as well, because the way your code is written, they can find ways to maybe write their code in more efficient ways. They can probably find ways to, even maybe render some tasks or render some different areas within the game to be able to give them better performance overall. So this is a very interesting topic. I think one thing many people, are starting to realize is, the consoles are very, very limited. Whenever you put them in these situations, you're not going to be able to get the very best out of them. But if you build from ground up, if you start the development of your game from ground up to say, okay, we're targeting 60 FPS, and wherever the game is able to reach and run 60 FPS or 16 milliseconds frame time persistence, then that's where we're going to go. And this is why you see Marvel Spider-Man successful in doing it. This is why you see God of War, Ragnarok successful in doing it. It's why you see Horizon Forbidden West also successful in doing it, Days Gone, and so on and so forth. There are, however, some of the, outliers in terms of some games that are designed and are, designed for really, really, not so powerful machines. So a PS5 and a Series X can brute force those to 60 FPS. They can just unlock the FPS, and the PS5 and the Series X are going to be sufficient to do it. But a game like Final Fantasy that's demanding of, effects and visual effects and all kinds of different, requirements anyways, in terms of the way the production of the game is, those are going to be very, very important. Those are going to, require more hardware than the PlayStation 5 is capable of actually giving. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this all unfolds. I'm looking to see how Square Enix is able to kind of like come out of this, because overall, this is something that people are demanding, but I think the demand came too late. The game was already being made. The consoles showed up and said, we can do 60 FPS. And then some people, hopefully, because their games were able to, adapt quickly to 60 FPS, were able to make the change on the fly. But not every developer could have made that change because they wanted to actually finish making their game. They were already going and they were like, man, maybe Final Fantasy 17, we're going to basically guarantee 60 FPS. But right now, this is where we are. We're going to release 16. Maybe give a performance mode, see where that goes, and then we'll go from there. Talk to me in the comment section. Hopefully we can talk pretty soon about this conversation and this topic. Peace out.